October 23, 1943. 22,000 feet above Schweinfurt, Germany. Hauptmann Werner Schroer squinted through the armored glass of his Messerschmitt Bf 109 G6 as unusual silhouettes emerged from the cloud bank ahead. The twin-boom configuration was unmistakable. Lockheed P-38 Lightnings, their distinctive forked tail design making them instantly recognizable even at 3 miles distance. Gabelschwanz-Teufel, he transmitted to his wingman with barely concealed amusement. Fork-tailed devils they call themselves. They look more like flying tridents to me. Easy meat, mein freund. Schroer, a decorated ace with 61 confirmed victories primarily earned against British and American bombers in the Mediterranean theater, watched 8 P-38Gs of the 55th Fighter Group climbing toward the B-17 formation his staffel had been stalking. The American fighter's twin Allison engines left distinctive white contrails in the frigid air, making them visible for miles, a tactical disadvantage that German pilots had learned to exploit. What Schroer couldn't see from his cockpit was the weapon system housed in the Lightning's distinctive nose. Unlike every other fighter in the sky that day, which scattered their guns across wings and fuselage, the P-38 mounted its entire armament in the nose. 4 50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns and 1 20mm Hispano cannon, all firing through the same focal point with 0 convergence angle to calculate, 0 dispersion pattern to compensate for. The mathematics of this arrangement would become apparent in approximately 47 seconds, when Schroer's formation would discover that fighting a P-38 wasn't like fighting any other aircraft they'd encountered. The concentrated fire from those nose-mounted guns created a cylinder of destruction 18 inches in diameter at 400 yards. A bullet stream so dense that anything caught in it didn't just get damaged, it ceased to exist. Within 6 months, the fork-tailed devil would transform from an object of curiosity into the most feared American fighter in the European theater. German pilots would develop specific tactical doctrines just to avoid engaging P-38s. Intelligence reports would warn that the Lightning's unique design advantages made it nearly unbeatable in certain situations. And veterans like Schroer, if they survived, would speak of the concentrated firepower with something approaching reverence. But on that October morning in 1943, approaching at 280 miles per hour with the sun behind him, Werner Schroer still believed the ungainly American fighter was vulnerable. He was about to learn why Lockheed's engineers had chosen to put all their guns in one basket. The Lockheed P-38 Lightning emerged from one of the most ambitious specifications ever issued by the United States Army Air Corps. In February 1937, Circular Proposal X-608 demanded the impossible: an interceptor capable of 360 miles per hour at 20,000 feet with endurance of 1 hour at full throttle. Performance that exceeded every fighter then flying by 40%. Clarence Kelly Johnson, a 27-year-old engineer at Lockheed's Burbank facility, proposed a radical solution. Since no single engine could provide the required power, he would use 2. But mounting them conventionally in the wings would create asymmetric thrust problems if one engine failed. Johnson's answer was the twin-boom configuration that would become iconic. The XP-38 prototype that first flew on January 27, 1939, shocked military observers. 2 Allison V1710 12-cylinder liquid-cooled engines, each producing 1,150 horsepower, were mounted in sleek nacelles extending from the wings. Between them sat a central nacelle housing the cockpit, armament, and tricycle landing gear. Another innovation that made the P-38 the first production fighter with a nose wheel. But it was the armament arrangement that truly set the Lightning apart. By concentrating all weapons in the nose, Johnson eliminated several problems that plagued conventional fighters. Wing-mounted guns required harmonization, adjusting each gun's angle so their bullet streams converged at a specific distance, typically 250 to 300 yards. Get closer or farther than convergence range, and your bullets spread out, reducing hit probability. Wing guns also created recoil forces that could yaw the aircraft, disrupting aim. The P-38's nose mounting meant all 5 guns fired parallel to the aircraft's centerline, converging naturally at infinity. At any range, The bullet pattern remained tight. The recoil forces, while substantial, the combined weapons delivered 2,000 pounds of recoil force when firing, pushed straight back along the fuselage center line, barely affecting the aircraft's attitude. The ammunition capacity was staggering. Each 50 caliber gun held 500 rounds, 2,000 rounds total of heavy machine gun ammunition. The 20mm cannon carried 150 rounds, each projectile weighing 5 times more than a 50 caliber bullet and carrying an explosive charge that detonated on impact. Lieutenant Colonel Cass Howe, the Army Air Corps test pilot who evaluated the XP-38 prototype at Wright Field, wrote in his official report, "The concentration of fire is unlike anything in our inventory. At 300 yards, I observed all rounds striking within a 2-foot circle. The effect on the target aircraft was catastrophic. Structural failure occurred in less than 1 second of sustained fire." When P-38Fs first arrived in England in July 1942 with the first fighter group, the problems were immediate. The cold, damp European weather was murder on the Allison engines. Spark plugs fouled constantly. Coolant systems froze on the ground. The engines, designed for California's mild climate, struggled in Britain's harsh conditions. The first fighter group's combat debut on August 9, 1942, a sweep over the Netherlands, demonstrated every weakness. Of 34 P-38s that took off, only 25 reached the combat area. 3 turned back with engine problems. 2 suffered turbo failures. 4 got lost in the clouds. When the formation finally encountered German fighters, Focke-Wulf FW-190s from Jagdgeschwader 26, the Lightning's advantages in speed and altitude were neutralized by their mechanical problems and pilot inexperience. The mission claimed 1 German fighter probable, but cost 3 P-38s and 2 pilots. Oberleutnant Josef Pips Priller, Staffelkapitän of 8JG-26, filed a combat report that revealed German impressions. The new American twin-engine fighter appears formidable on paper but proves awkward in combat. The aircraft is large, easily visible, and unable to maneuver with our FW-190s below 20,000 feet. Several pilots reported hitting the enemy aircraft repeatedly without visible effect, suggesting heavy armor. However, the type appears mechanically unreliable. We observed 3 separate aircraft trailing smoke and departing the combat area without having been engaged. The assessment seemed accurate. Through autumn 1942, P-38 units struggled with mechanical reliability, tactical doctrine, and pilot training. German pilots began calling the Lightning the flying bunk bed or the forked devil with no bite. The twin-boom configuration made it distinctive, but German pilots saw no reason to fear it. That perception began changing in North Africa. By November 1942, improved P-38H models were arriving in North Africa for Operation Torch. The Mediterranean theater presented different challenges than Europe. The weather was clearer, the distances greater. The P-38's range, 1,300 miles with drop tanks, made it ideal for offensive sweeps across the vast desert. Second Lieutenant Jack Ilfrey of the 94th Fighter Squadron, 1st Fighter Group, flew his first combat mission on November 19, 1942, a sweep over Tunisia. His formation of 8 P-38Fs encountered a mixed group of Messerschmitt Bf 109s and Machi C-202s at 15,000 feet. Ilfrey's first burst of fire missed completely. His second burst hit a Bf 109 but caused no visible damage. The range was too great, perhaps 500 yards. Frustrated, he closed to 200 yards despite his flight leader's warnings about return fire. When Ilfrey pressed the trigger again, the effect was startling. The concentrated stream of bullets and 20mm shells struck the Messerschmitt's fuselage dead center. In Ilfrey's gun camera footage, studied extensively by intelligence officers afterward, the German fighter appeared to crumple inward. The fuselage broke in half just aft of the cockpit. The tail section tumbled away. The forward portion, engines still running, nosed over and spun toward the desert 3 miles below. "I'd never seen a fighter disintegrate like that," Ilfrey recalled in a 1987 interview. "With wing-mounted guns, you get hits scattered across the target. The P-38 put everything through the same hole. It was like hitting the aircraft with a circular saw." The gun camera footage circulated through American fighter units in North Africa. Pilots began experimenting with optimal firing ranges. The consensus emerged. Between 150 and 300 yards, the P-38's concentrated fire was devastating. Closer than 150 yards risked collision or debris strikes. Farther than 300 yards, even the concentrated pattern began spreading. By March 1943, American P-38 units had developed effective tactics. The results showed in the kill ratios. German and Italian pilots were beginning to respect the fork-tailed fighter. Maggiore Adriano Visconti, an Italian ace with 26 victories, encountered P-38s over Tunisia in April 1943. His combat report noted, "The American twin-engine fighter has formidable armament concentrated in the nose. When this aircraft opens fire, the stream of tracers appears as a solid bar of light. Aircraft struck by this fire do not survive. I witnessed a Machi C-202 literally sawed in half by a 2-second burst." The true revelation of P-38 firepower came on April 18, 1943, during Operation Vengeance. The mission to assassinate Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of Pearl Harbor and commander of the Japanese Combined Fleet. 16 P-38G Lightnings of the 339th Fighter Squadron launched from Guadalcanal on a 435-mile overwater flight to intercept Yamamoto's transport. The mission required perfect navigation and split-second timing. At 9:35 a.m., exactly on schedule, the P-38s climbed from their wave-top approach and spotted 2 Betty bombers with 6-0 escorts. Lieutenant Rex Barber closed to 200 yards behind the first Betty and pressed the trigger. The concentrated fire, 63 projectiles per second converging on a single point, struck the bomber's tail section. The Betty's tail separated from the fuselage in less than 1 second of sustained fire. The bomber crashed into the jungle, killing Yamamoto instantly. Barber's combat camera captured the entire sequence. Intelligence analysts counted the firing time. 1.8 seconds. In that brief moment, approximately 113 projectiles struck the bomber. The concentration of fire was so intense that the Betty's structure simply failed. Japanese intelligence, analyzing wreckage and survivor accounts, noted, "The American twin-engine fighter's armament appears grouped in the nose, creating unusual concentration of fire. Aircraft struck by this fire suffer catastrophic structural failure within seconds." Chief Petty Officer Saburo Sakai, Japan's highest-scoring surviving ace with 64 victories, later wrote, "We called it the needle gun. It could sew a seam of bullets through an aircraft with surgical precision. When a skilled P-38 pilot got his sight on you, you were finished. The concentration of fire gave you no chance of survival if he hit." By September 1943, improved P-38J models were arriving in England. These variants addressed earlier problems, improved cockpit heating, flat panel windscreens, and critically dive flaps that allowed safe high-speed dives. The 20th, 55th, and 364th Fighter Groups began flying bomber escort deep into Germany. The Lightning's range, 1,700 miles with external tanks, meant it could accompany B-17s beyond the reach of other fighters. On October 14, 1943, Black Thursday, P-38s escorted B-17s attacking Schweinfurt. Major Robert Littke described an engagement near Aachen. Observed approximately 30 enemy aircraft forming for head-on attack. My flight dove on them. I selected a Messerschmitt Bf 110. Opened fire at 300 yards. Enemy aircraft's right engine exploded, right wing separated, fuselage broke in half. Elapsed firing time approximately 2 seconds. The concentration of fire proved decisive in head-on attacks. Unlike wing-mounted guns that dispersed across the target, the P-38's nose guns put everything through one point. In engagements where closing speeds exceeded 600 mph and firing windows lasted less than 2 seconds, this simplicity was the difference between hits and misses. Oberleutnant Heinz Knoke, a Luftwaffe ace with 33 victories, wrote in his diary on October 20th, "The twin-engine American fighters are becoming a serious problem. Their nose guns fire a solid stream. If the pilot's aim is true, you are hit by every bullet. 3 aircraft from our staffel were destroyed today in head-on encounters. All 3 simply disintegrated. No survivors. By early 1944, the latest P-38J-25 variants featured paddle-blade propellers that dramatically improved climb rate, from 2,200 feet per minute to 3,000 feet per minute. The massive propeller also created a distinctive thundering roar. German ground troops began calling it Donnerschlag, thunderclap. February 22, 1944, marked the turning point. Captain Walter Mahurin led 6 P-38s escorting B-17s when ground control warned of a large enemy formation, 40 fighters positioning to attack the bombers. Mahurin's flight had altitude advantage. They dropped tanks and dove, accelerating to 450 meters. Mahurin selected a Bf-109 and fired. The concentrated stream hit the German fighter's left wing root. The wing folded upward and separated completely. Total firing time, 2 seconds. His wingman destroyed a second Bf-109 in 1.4 seconds. 95 rounds of 50 caliber and 14 rounds of 20 mm. The remaining 4 P-38s each claimed kills. Within 8 seconds, 6 German fighters were falling. The engagement included a fateful encounter with Lieutenant Kurt Bühligen, a Knight's Cross recipient with 112 victories. Bühligen led 3 FW-190s in a climbing attack, but Mahurin's P-38, with its superior high-altitude performance, simply climbed away. When Bühligen rolled to disengage, Mahurin fired a deflection shot. 1 second of fire. 120 mm shell hit Bühligen's fuel tank. The FW-190 exploded. Both wings separated simultaneously. Kurt Bühligen died instantly. The survivors reported to their commanders that the P-38's concentrated firepower made close combat suicidal. Oberst Walter Ossau's report to Luftwaffe High Command captured the psychological impact. Our men report that being fired upon by a P-38 is different from other fighters. If you see tracers, you are already hit. The pilot either misses completely or destroys you completely. There is no middle ground. The P-38's combination of range, firepower, and performance made it an ace-maker. Major Richard Bong, flying P-38s in the Pacific, became America's highest-scoring ace with 40 victories. His tactic was simple: climb high, dive fast, fire close, zoom away. The nose guns meant I could aim the whole airplane at the target, Bong explained. If my aim was true, the target went down. In one engagement over New Guinea on April 12, 1944, Bong destroyed 3 Japanese fighters in 4 minutes. His ammunition expenditure, 340 rounds of 50 caliber, 17% of his load, and 48 rounds of 20 mm, 32%. By comparison, pilots with wing-mounted guns typically expended 50% or more per kill. The dispersed fire, requiring longer bursts to achieve results. Major Thomas McGuire, the second highest scoring ace with 38 victories, emphasized the P-38's teamwork capabilities. One pair flies high cover, the other attacks. After the attack pair climbs, they become high cover while the original high pair attacks. This rotation keeps enemy fighters constantly defensive. Colonel Charles MacDonald scored 27 victories in P-38s. Lieutenant Colonel Jack Jenkins scored 16.5. Captain Arthur Jeffrey finished with 14.5. Dozens more achieved ace status. The common factor: understanding the aircraft's unique characteristics. Those who tried to dogfight failed. Those who exploited the Lightning's advantages, speed, altitude, firepower, structural strength, excelled. By summer 1944, P-38s transitioned to fighter-bomber operations. The P-38L could carry 4,000 pounds of ordnance, 2 1,600-pound bombs, and 10 5-inch rockets. But the nose guns remained the most feared weapon. On July 25th, during Operation Cobra, Captain Claude Kinsey's flight attacked a German column near Marigny. 40 trucks, 6 half-tracks, 2 Panzer IV tanks. Kinsey's tactic: destroy the lead and rear vehicles to trap the column, then destroy everything between. Diving to 1,500 feet, Kinsey opened fire on the lead tank at 800 yards. The 50 caliber armor-piercing rounds penetrated the tank's thin top armor. Multiple rounds struck the engine deck and ammunition racks. The tank exploded with such violence it flipped onto its side, blocking the road. With both ends blocked, the column was trapped. The 4 P-38s made repeated passes, destroying 38 trucks, all 6 half-tracks, and both tanks in 12 minutes. German survivors reported that the concentrated fire from the nose guns meant any vehicle targeted was destroyed. There was no warning, no near misses, just instant annihilation. Oberleutnant Hans Weiss, who survived the attack, later stated, "We called them the lightning of death. When you heard that sound and saw those twin booms, you knew death was coming. The guns didn't spray fire randomly like other fighters. They concentrated everything into a beam. Whatever they aimed at ceased to exist." By early 1945, German pilots had developed grudging respect bordering on fear. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, former head of Luftwaffe fighters, met with Allied pilots after the war. Asked about the P-38, his response was recorded. "We made a terrible mistake in 1943. We saw this big heavy fighter and laughed. The Americans don't understand air combat, we said. We were wrong. The Americans didn't try to build a European fighter. They built an American one. They understood that in a war of attrition, the plane that could deliver devastating firepower would win. Those nose guns, we called them Roosevelt's piano because of the sound. Once you heard it, you never forgot it. Many of my friends heard it for the last time." The P-38's final statistics defied comprehension. In Europe, 3,752 German aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, 3,315 destroyed on ground. In the Pacific, 697 Japanese aircraft destroyed, 150 on ground. The 55th Fighter Group alone achieved kill ratios exceeding 10-1 in several engagements. Behind these numbers lay German pilots, who learned too late that the fork-tailed fighter wasn't a joke. The concentrated firepower of those nose-mounted guns rewrote aerial combat doctrine. German veterans who survived spoke of P-38s in hushed tones decades later. At the U.S. Air Force Museum in Dayton, a restored P-38D sits among legendary fighters. Below it, a quote from an unnamed German pilot taken from a 1945 interrogation. "We laughed when we first saw them, fat, ugly American fighters. We stopped laughing when we realized they just pointed those guns at you, and you ceased to exist. The laughter died with our comrades." The P-38 Lightning entered combat as an object of derision and ended the war as an instrument of annihilation. 8 synchronized weapons firing through a single point buried the Luftwaffe under concentrated streams of lead. German pilots had laughed at the fork-tailed devil in April 1943. By May 1945, there were no German pilots left to laugh.